need to say up front that I still don't have a clean explanation for what happened that winter. And honestly, that's the part that bothers me the most. If someone had broken in, if someone had been caught, if a detective had ever called me back with a name, I think I could have closed the book on it by now. Instead, I just have 3 weeks of my life in early 2024 that I go back over sometimes at 2 in the morning, turning the details around like a puzzle piece that doesn't match any of the others. My name's Aaron. I was 29 at the time, working night shift as an ICU nurse at a hospital in Spokane, Washington. I lived alone in a rented house on the South Hill, a few blocks off Manito Park, on a quiet street with big old maple trees that dropped leaves the size of dinner plates every October. It's a nice neighborhood, safe by most standards. The kind of place where people leave their garage doors half open and nobody thinks twice. I'd been in that house. It was a small 2-bedroom rental, the kind of place that had character, meaning the floors creaked in specific spots and the radiators clanked at night. But I loved it. I had a cat named Waffles, an orange tabby who mostly ignored me except at 4 a.m. when he wanted food, and I had a routine that worked for my schedule. I worked 3 12-hour shifts a week, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., Thursday through Saturday usually, so my weekend fell in the middle of everyone else's week. I'd get home a little after 7:30, eat something small, watch part of a show to wind down. At the time, I was rewatching The Office for probably the 4th time, just for the noise of it. And I'd be asleep by 9 or 9:30 in the morning. Blackout curtains up, phone on silent, except for a couple of contacts. The first thing I remember noticing, though I didn't think anything of it then, was a car. It was a dark green Honda Civic, older model, maybe early 2010s, with a crack in the lower corner of the windshield on the passenger side. I noticed it because it was parked across the street and a little down from my house on a Thursday morning in late January, right around when I was getting home from my shift. It's a residential street. People park on it all the time, so a car being there wasn't strange. What I noticed, if I'm being honest, is that there was someone sitting in it at 7:40 in the morning, just sitting there. I didn't get a good look at the driver. Gray hoodie, maybe, hood up, looking down at a phone or something in their lap. I remember thinking, half asleep. Someone's waiting to pick somebody up for work, and going inside. 2 days later, when I got home Saturday morning, the same car was there again. Same spot, more or less. This time, about 2 houses down, on my side of the street. That's when it registered a little more. Not panic, nothing like that. Just a small, that's the same car kind of thought. I actually mentioned it to my coworker, Denise, later that week when we were restocking supplies during a lull around 3 a.m. I said something like, "This is going to sound dumb, but I think somebody's been parking outside my house." She laughed and said, "Girl, everybody parks outside houses. That's what streets are for." Which fair. I let it go. I want to be clear that I genuinely wasn't scared. I was curious, mildly annoyed at myself for being paranoid, but not scared. It's easy looking back to feel like I should have known something was wrong immediately, but that's not how it works when you're tired and the world looks normal and nothing has actually happened yet. The thing that changed that was small, almost stupid, and it's the detail that still bothers me more than anything else that happened later. It was a Tuesday, which wasn't even one of my usual work days. I'd picked up an extra shift to cover for someone on leave. I got home around 7:45 a.m., and it had just started snowing. That wet early morning snow that doesn't stick yet, but makes everything smell clean and cold. I was walking up my driveway digging for my keys, half on autopilot, and I glanced at my front porch. There was a coffee cup sitting on the second step. A to-go cup, like from a gas station, with the plastic lid still on it. Not open, not spilled, just sitting there, centered almost perfectly in the middle of the step, like someone had set it down carefully. I remember standing there for a second, just looking at it. My first thought was that a delivery driver had set it down and forgotten it, or that it had blown there from somewhere, though it hadn't been windy. I picked it up. I shouldn't have, I know that now, but I wasn't thinking about evidence. I was thinking about my porch, and it was still a little warm. Not hot. Warm, like it had been sitting there 20-30 minutes. I didn't drink coffee that brand. I didn't know anyone who did, that I could think of. I threw it away and didn't tell anyone about it for almost a week, because when I try to say it out loud, even now, it sounds like nothing. Someone left a coffee cup on my porch. That's it. That's the whole story, if I stopped there. But I didn't stop. 4 days after the coffee cup, I woke up around 2 p.m., which for me was mid-afternoon, the middle of my sleep cycle basically, because Waffles was going crazy at the back door. Not meowing to go out, but this low, continuous growl yell I'd never heard him make before, hackles up, staring at the door like something was on the other side of it. I got up, heart already going a little fast, and looked out the small window in the kitchen that faces the backyard. Nothing. Empty yard, my neighbor's fence, a few inches of old snow that hadn't melted. I checked the back door, locked. I checked the side gate, latched. I told myself it was probably a raccoon or a stray cat that had spooked him, went back to bed, and didn't sleep well for the rest of that afternoon. That was the same week I started noticing the car again, except now it wasn't just mornings. I saw it once around leaving for my shift, parked in almost the exact same spot down the block. I remember sitting in my own car for a second, engine running, just staring at it in my rearview mirror, trying to convince myself I was inventing a pattern out of coincidences. Green Civic, cracked windshield. I couldn't see if anyone was in it that time because of the tint and the angle, and I didn't want to walk over and check, because if I was wrong, if it really was nothing, I didn't want to be the woman knocking on a stranger's car window over nothing. I told my sister about it on the phone that night on my drive in. She lives in Boise, and she's always been the practical one in the family. She said, "Take a picture of the license plate next time. If you see it again after that, call it in. Not 911, just the non-emergency line. So there's a record." That felt like good, grounded advice, and it made me feel a little less like I was losing it. I did see it again, 2 mornings later. This time, though, it wasn't parked. It was idling, right in front of my house, not down the block, but directly across the street, engine running, exhaust fogging up in the cold, headlights off even though it was still dark enough at 7 a.m. in February that most cars still had them on. I sat in my driveway in my own car for probably 90 seconds without moving. My hands were actually shaking a little, which embarrassed me even in the moment because nothing had happened. A car was idling. People do that. But something about the stillness of it, the way it didn't pull away, the way it felt like it was waiting specifically for me to get home, made my whole body go cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I did what my sister said. I got my phone out, zoomed in as much as I could, and took a few pictures through my windshield. I got the plate. Washington. I say I still remember the first 3 characters, but honestly I've gone back and forth enough times in my head that I'm not confident anymore, and that uncertainty is another thing that eats at me. I think it started with BFH, but I'm not sure, and there's no record I can check now because of what happened after. I went inside without looking at the car directly, deadbolted the door, and called the non-emergency police line with my hands still not quite steady. The dispatcher took the information politely enough. Plate number, description, said an officer might swing by the area, but that with no crime actually committed, there wasn't much more they could do beyond documenting it. I understood that logically. It didn't make me feel better. I want to slow down here, because this is the part where things stopped being off and started being frightening in a way I can't fully explain with normal words. That was a Thursday. I worked that night, came home Friday morning, no car. I actually let myself relax a little, told myself the police drive-by must have scared whoever it was off, or that I'd been imagining a pattern that wasn't really there. I slept fine that day, better than I had in over a week. Saturday night on shift was uneventful, a slow night in the ICU, 1 new admission around 1 a.m., a quiet unit otherwise. I remember it specifically because Denise and I sat at the nurse's station a little after 3, talking about nothing, some show she was watching, and I felt normal for the first time in almost 2 weeks. I got home around 7:40 Sunday morning. No car on the street. Overcast, cold, quiet, the kind of gray Spokane morning where the light never really seems to fully arrive. I unlocked my front door, stepped inside, and immediately knew something was wrong, before I could even articulate why. The house was too warm. I keep the thermostat around 62 when I'm gone, because I'm cheap and because I'm usually under blankets anyway. When I walked in, it was warm. Not hot, but noticeably warmer than I ever kept it, like someone had bumped it up to 70 or higher. My first thought, stupidly, was that the thermostat had malfunctioned. Then I saw the note on my kitchen counter. It wasn't threatening, not in an obvious way, and that's honestly what made it so much worse. It was a single piece of paper, torn from a small notepad, folded once. On it, in handwriting that was almost disturbingly neat, small and even, it said, "You keep your house colder than mine. I like it better this way." That's it. No signature, no name, nothing else. I remember reading it 3 times before the words fully registered, before the fact that someone had been inside my locked house registered. Then I remember backing out the front door, standing on my porch in the cold in my scrubs, calling 911 with my hands shaking so badly I typed my own address wrong the first time. The police came. 2 officers, a woman and a man, walked through the house with me standing frozen by the front door, unwilling to go back in. Nothing was stolen, as far as my laptop was still on the coffee table. My jewelry, not much, but some, was untouched in my bedroom. Waffles was fine, hiding under my bed, which in hindsight might explain why he hadn't reacted at all when I came in. Whoever it was had likely already been gone for a while by the time I got home, or Waffles had simply learned this presence wasn't new. The back door had a small mark on the frame near the deadbolt, consistent, the officer said, with someone using a shim or a slim tool to slip the latch, though the door itself hadn't been forced or damaged in any obvious way. No fingerprints came back usable. They took the note as evidence. They asked if I knew anyone who might do this. An ex, a coworker, anyone with a grudge. I genuinely couldn't think of anyone. I'd been with the same boyfriend for 2 years at that point. No bad breakups behind me, no conflicts at work worth mentioning. The car, I gave them the plate number I had. It came back registered to an address that, when they checked, turned out to be a defunct auto shop that had closed almost 3 years earlier. Dead end. I didn't sleep in that house again. My boyfriend Marcus came and stayed with me for the 2 nights before I moved most of my things to his apartment, and even with him there, even with the locks changed the same day, new deadbolt, new door handle, a chain added for good measure, I lay awake staring at the ceiling every time the radiator clanked, every time a car passed on the street outside. The thermostat thing haunts me more than almost anything else, if I'm honest, because it means whoever was in my house wasn't in a hurry. They didn't run in, leave a note, and run out. They were comfortable enough, unhurried enough, to adjust the temperature to their liking and wait, or at least stay long enough for the house to actually warm up, which takes time in an old house with old radiators. That's not the behavior of someone breaking in to steal something. That's the behavior of someone who felt, for however long they were there, like the house was theirs. I changed my work schedule not long after, moved to a different unit that ran a slightly different shift pattern, and within 2 months, I'd moved out of that house entirely, into an apartment complex with keyed entry and cameras in the parking lot, something I never would have cared about before. The green Civic never showed up again, not on my new street, not that I ever saw. The police case went nowhere. Without prints, without a real lead on the plate, and without anything actually taken, there wasn't much for them to chase. I checked in twice over the following months. Both times, no updates. I still think about the more than the note, honestly, because it was so early, so almost gentle, compared to what came after. I think about how long someone must have sat outside my house, watching me leave for work, learning my schedule well enough to know exactly when I'd be gone for 12 hours straight. I think about the fact that whoever it was clearly wanted me to know they'd been there. The note wasn't hidden. It was left in plain view, on the counter, waiting for me. That was a choice. If they'd wanted to just watch me, just come and go unnoticed, they could have. They didn't want that. They wanted me to feel it. The house on Manito sold about 8 months after I moved out. I still get the real estate emails sometimes because I never unsubscribed. I don't know the people who live there now. I've thought more than once about reaching out somehow, telling them, but what would I even say? Hi, you don't know me, but the person who lived here before you might still be watching the house. It sounds insane written out like that. It sounded insane living it too. I never found out who it was. I never found out why me, specifically, out of every house on that street, every woman living alone in that neighborhood. And I never found out what happened to that green Civic, whether it's still out there somewhere, still idling outside someone else's house in the cold at 7 in the morning, waiting. Story 2. I wrote, I've told this story to maybe 4 people in my life, and every single time I leave something out, because saying it all at once makes it sound like I'm exaggerating for effect. I'm not. I'm going to try to lay it out here the way it actually happened, in order, and let you decide what you think it means, because I still don't know. I'm Josh. In late 2023, I was 24, living in Louisville, Kentucky, in a small apartment off Bardstown Road near the Highlands, working nights as a delivery driver for one of the grocery delivery apps, the kind where you pick up orders from a store and drive them to people's houses. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent for the hours, especially the overnight shifts, which not many drivers wanted. I liked driving at night. Less traffic, fewer people yelling at you for a wrong order, and honestly, I liked the quiet. I'd usually work from about 9 p.m. to 3 or 4 in the morning, 4 or 5 nights a week, mostly covering the Highlands, Germantown, and parts of the original Highlands neighborhood. Older streets, narrow, lined with shotgun houses and duplexes, the kind of area where half the porches still have Christmas lights up well into February because nobody bothers taking them down. I drove a 2016 Corolla, silver, with a crack in the driver's side mirror housing from a shopping cart incident that was entirely my own fault. I mentioned the car because it matters later. The job itself was routine almost to the point of numbness. You get an order, you drive to the store. For me, it was usually a Kroger on Bardstown or sometimes a smaller specialty grocery, depending on what got assigned. You shop the list, you drive to the address, you drop it off, you move to the next one. Most nights I'd do 6, 8, sometimes 10 deliveries. I had a rhythm to it. I listened to the same 3 or 4 podcasts on rotation. I knew which gas station on my route had the best coffee at 1 a.m. I knew which streets had bad potholes that would rattle my fillings if I hit them going more than 20. This story starts, as far as I can tell, in November of that year. Though looking back, there might have been earlier signs I just didn't clock as anything. It was a Tuesday night, cold, the kind of Kentucky cold that isn't dramatic, but gets into your hands anyway. I had a delivery to a house on a street off Barrett Avenue. Small one-story place, porch light off, which wasn't unusual. A lot of customers don't bother leaving the porch light on, even when they've asked for a doorstep drop-off. I parked, grabbed the bags, walked up. There was a man standing at the edge of the yard, near the sidewalk, just standing there, not doing anything. No phone in his hand, no dog on a leash, nothing that explained why a grown man would be standing still on a residential sidewalk at 11:20 on a Tuesday night in November. He was maybe mid-40s, medium build, wearing a plain dark jacket, and he was looking at me, not glancing, looking, in a steady, unbothered way, like he'd been waiting for me to walk up. I did the normal thing. I gave a small nod, said something like, "How's it going?" the reflexive thing you say to strangers to diffuse a moment that feels slightly off, and he said, "Long night?" I said something non-committal, dropped the groceries on the porch, took my photo for the app, and left. By the time I got back to my car, he wasn't on the sidewalk anymore. I didn't see where he'd gone. I remember thinking it was mildly strange, filing it away the way you file away 100 small strange things that happen during a shift, and moving on to the next delivery. I want to be honest that I didn't think about that man again for almost 2 weeks. The second time I saw him, or believed I saw him, because I want to be fair to my own uncertainty here, was a Thursday night in early December. A different neighborhood entirely. A street over in Germantown, probably a mile and a half from where I'd seen him the first time. Different house, different customer, nothing connecting the 2 deliveries except that they were both mine. Same guy, same dark jacket as far as I could tell in the porch light. Standing near a parked car this time, not moving, watching me carry bags up a set of concrete steps. I remember my stomach doing something uncomfortable, a small drop, before my brain even fully processed why. It was the stillness. Normal people on a sidewalk at night are usually doing something, walking a dog, smoking, on the phone, anything. He was just standing, hands in his jacket pockets, watching. I didn't say anything, did the delivery quickly, got in my car, and sat there for a second in the driver's seat with the engine running, watching him in my mirror. He didn't move. He just stood there watching my car until I pulled away. I told myself it was probably a coincidence. Louisville isn't a huge city, and delivery drivers cover the same general few neighborhoods over and over. It wasn't impossible that I'd cross paths twice with the same random guy on a smoke break or a late walk. I almost convinced myself of that. Then, about 10 days later, it happened a third time. And this time, there was no way to write it off as coincidence. Because this time, he was in the parking lot of the Kroger where I picked up orders. It was around 10 p.m. I'd just walked out with 2 bags for my next delivery, heading to my car, and he was standing near the cart corral, maybe 30 feet from where I'd parked, not doing anything with the cart, just standing there in that same dark jacket. He looked at me the second I came out the doors, like he'd been waiting for me to appear, and this time, he said something. He said, "You're fast tonight." I stopped walking. I remember the cold air, the smell of exhaust from an idling car nearby, the fluorescent light buzzing over the cart corral. I said, "Sorry, do I know you?" And he just smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, closed-mouth thing, and said, "You will," and turned and walked off toward the edge of the parking lot, toward the street, and got into a car I hadn't noticed before, an older sedan, dark-colored, and drove off before I could even think to get a plate number. I sat in my car in that parking lot for probably 10 minutes before I could make myself drive. My hands were cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I called my roommate, Alex, from the parking lot, and he picked up groggy, and I said something like, "This is going to sound crazy, but I think someone's following me on my route," and even saying it out loud made it feel more real and more impossible to explain at the same time. I finished my did the money, and because I told myself I was being dramatic, I didn't see him again the rest of that shift, but the first started noticing things differently after that. I started paying attention to every person standing still on a sidewalk, every parked car with someone sitting in it, every man in a dark jacket, and Louisville, it turns out, has a lot of men in dark jackets in December. I reported it to the delivery app's support line for whatever that was worth, which turned out to be almost nothing. They said they'd noted on my account, suggested I could decline deliveries in that immediate area if I felt unsafe, and that was more or less it. I didn't have a name, a plate, Anything concrete enough for police to act on beyond a report for the record, which I did file, at the 4th Division Station, with an officer who was polite, but clearly had no leads to chase from "man in a jacket" said something odd to me twice. Here's where it gets harder to explain, and where I lose people a little when I tell this story. Because I don't have proof, only my own memory of it. And memory under stress isn't exactly a reliable narrator. About a week after the parking lot incident, I was on a delivery to a house on a street I genuinely never delivered to before. I checked my order history afterward to be sure. A house off Payne Street, small brick place, 2nd story light on, everything else dark. I walked up, dropped the bags, took my photo, and as I turned to leave, I glanced at the mailbox by the door out of habit, the way you sometimes glance at names on mailboxes without really thinking about why. The name on the mailbox started with the same last name as mine. Not identical, a coincidence of a fairly common surname, Carter, which isn't exactly rare, but seeing my own last name on a stranger's mailbox on a street I'd never been to before, 3 weeks into feeling watched, did something to my nervous system that I can't fully put into words. I got back in my car and just sat there for a minute, feeling stupid and shaken at the same time, telling myself it meant nothing, that Carter is a common enough name that it happens. That would have been the end of it, another strange detail to add to a growing pile of things I couldn't explain, except that 4 days later I got a delivery request, a real one, through the app, assigned the normal way, for that exact same address on Payne Street. I remember staring at the address on my phone screen for a long moment before accepting it, my chest tight, telling myself it was just a coincidence, that customers on my route repeat sometimes, that this was a real order from a real person who happened to live at a house I delivered to once before by chance. I drove there anyway. I don't fully know why, looking back. I could have declined it, taken the small penalty to my acceptance rate, and never gone back to that street. But something in me needed to see what was going on, needed to prove to myself it was nothing. The house was dark when I pulled up, no porch light, no upstairs light this time either. I got out, walked the bags up, and set them down, and I was turning to leave when the front door opened. Just a crack, just enough for a strip of darker interior to show. No light on inside at all, and a voice, his voice, I'm almost certain, though it was quieter than in the parking lot, said, "Thank you, Josh." I hadn't given my name. The app doesn't display driver names to customers in the delivery confirmation the way it displays customer names to drivers. It just shows a first initial and a photo of the bags. There was no reason behind that door to know my name, unless they'd looked it up some other way, through the order details somehow, or unless they'd learned it some other way entirely, a way I still don't want to think too hard about. I didn't respond. I don't remember walking back to my car. I remember being in the driver's seat with the doors locked, engine running, hands shaking too hard to shift into drive for a few seconds, and then I remember driving without any real memory of the route until I was home. I quit that job within the week. I gave notice, worked exactly one more shift, daytime only. I refused nights after that, and never went back to that part of the Highlands or Germantown alone after dark again if I could help it. I moved apartments about 4 months later, not directly because of this, or at least that's what I told myself, though Alex has said more than once that he thinks it was exactly because of this, and he's probably right. I never found out who he was. I looked up the address on Payne Street out of morbid curiosity a few weeks after I quit. Property records showed the house had been a rental, vacant for lease at the time listed, which didn't match a light being on upstairs the first time I delivered there, or a voice behind the door the second time. I don't know how to square that. Maybe I misread the listing date. Maybe someone was squatting there. Maybe there's a boring explanation I never landed on because I was too scared to keep digging. What still gets me, more than the man standing still on sidewalks, more than the parking lot, is the mailbox with my own last name on it, on a street I'd never been to, days before I got sent there for real. I've never been able to explain that one to myself in a way that feels solid. Common name, common coincidence, I tell myself, and most nights that's enough to let me sleep. Some nights it isn't. I still drive for work sometimes, different job now, daytime hours, nothing overnight. But I still catch myself checking mirrors more than I used to, still feel my stomach drop a little when I see someone standing still on a sidewalk at night, doing nothing, just watching. I know it's probably nothing, every time. I tell myself that every time. I just haven't fully believed it since that December. Story 3. I've gone back and forth for 2 years about whether to tell this one, mostly because the ending doesn't really end, and people don't love stories that don't end. But it happened, or something happened, and I've decided I'd rather put it somewhere than keep carrying it around by myself. My name's Priya. In the fall of 2025, I was 26, working night shifts as a 911 dispatcher for a county call center outside Richmond, Virginia, and living in a mid-sized apartment complex called Fenwick Court off Forest Hill Avenue on the south side of the James River. It's not a bad complex. Brick buildings, 3 stories, built sometime in the late 90s, a little dated but well kept. Mostly young professionals and a handful of retirees who'd lived there since it opened. My unit was 2 billions, second floor, corner of the building, which meant I only shared one real wall with a neighbor, and the other side faced the parking lot. The neighbor I shared that wall with was in 2C, and for the first 8 months I lived there, I genuinely could not have told you a single thing about whoever lived in it. No noise through the wall, no one in the hallway when I came and went. Nothing. If someone had asked me, I would have guessed the unit was empty, except that occasionally I'd see a light on through the blinds when I got home from a night shift around 3 or 4 a.m. And once, early on, I saw a shape move past the peephole light when I paused in the hallway looking for my keys, so I knew somebody was in there. Dispatching is the people who haven't done it. You spend 8, 10, 12 hours a night sitting in a headset listening to the absolute worst nights of strangers' lives. Car accidents, domestic situations, medical emergencies, the occasional prank call, and every so often something that stays with you for a long time after the call ends. It changes how you hear ordinary sounds. You get sensitized to distress in a voice, to the specific quality of silence that means someone on the other end of a call is too scared to speak. I mention this because I think it's relevant to how I reacted to what happened next, because I don't think I would have reacted the same way before I took that job. It started, as far as I can date it, in late September. I got home from my shift around 12:40 a.m. I'd worked an earlier rotation that month, 2 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. And as I was unlocking my door, I heard something through the wall from 2C. Not loud. A low, steady thumping, rhythmic, like someone repeating or a piece of furniture at a slow, even pace. Not aggressive sounding exactly, just constant. I stood in the hallway for a second listening to it, decided it wasn't my business, and went inside. It continued for maybe 20 more minutes after I got in, audible even through the shared wall, low enough that I could ignore it if the TV was on, but there if I paid attention. Then it stopped. I didn't think much of it. People do strange things behind closed doors, and a neighbor moving furniture at 1 a.m. isn't exactly the crime of the century. It happened again 3 nights later. The same low, even thumping, same rough time, somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m. And again the following week, twice. I started to notice a rough pattern. Never every night, but always late. Always that same steady rhythm. Never loud enough to justify a noise complaint. More like a habit than a disturbance. The thing that shifted my feelings about it from mildly annoying neighbor to something else happened in October, on a night I remember clearly because I'd had an unusually hard call that shift, a welfare check that turned into something worse than a welfare check, the kind of call that follows you home. I got back to my apartment around 1 a.m., emotionally wrung out, wanting nothing more than to shower and sleep, and as I was unlocking my door, I heard very clearly through the wall, a voice, not words I could make out, just a voice, low, male as far as I could tell, speaking at a steady, unbroken pace, like a phone call or someone talking to themselves or reading something aloud. What made me stop with my key still in the lock was that it didn't sound like a normal conversation rhythm. No pauses, no responses, no rise and fall the way a phone call has when someone's listening to the other side. Just a flat beach, going on, for as long as I stood there, which was probably close to a full minute before I made myself go inside. I told myself, lying in bed that night, that it was probably someone on a call with a bad connection, or someone watching something on their laptop with the volume too low to make out words but high enough to carry a voice. Reasonable explanations. I believed them mostly, because believing anything else felt like more than I had the emotional bandwidth for after the shift I'd had. Over the next month, noticing 2C more, the way you start noticing a splinter once you know it's there. I noticed the light through the blinds was almost always on, day or night, whenever I glanced at the gap under the door in the hallway. I noticed I never once saw a car that I could definitively connect to that unit in the parking lot, though that's not unusual in a complex where a lot of people don't have reserved spots. I noticed that the low thumping and the low voice never overlapped. It was always one or the other, never both on the same night, which felt like a strange, specific pattern for something that should have been random if it was as mundane as furniture moving or a phone call. The detail that actually scared me, the first real jump from unease into fear, happened in early November. I was leaving for my shift around 1:15 p.m., running slightly late, juggling my bag and my coffee and my keys in the hallway, and the door to 2C was open. Not wide open, cracked, maybe 8 inches, enough that I could see a sliver of the interior as I walked past. I wasn't trying to look, I just happened to glance as I passed, the way you glance at any open door in a hallway you walk through every day. The apartment, from what I could see in that sliver, was almost completely empty. No furniture that I could see in the small span visible to me. Bare walls, bare floor, no rug, nothing on the walls. It looked less like someone's home and more like a unit between tenants, freshly vacated or not yet moved into, which didn't match a year and a half of lights on, of thumping through the wall, of a voice at 1 a.m. I didn't stop walking. I didn't want whoever was in there to know I'd looked. But that image stuck with me for the rest of that shift, an itch I couldn't scratch. And when I got home that night, the light under the door of 2C was on again, same as always, like nothing about it had ever looked empty at all. I asked the leasing office about it as casually as I could manage. A few days later, under the pretense of asking whether the building allowed a certain kind of drilling for a shelf I wanted to hang, and worked the conversation around to, is 2C still occupied? I feel like I never see anyone. The woman at the desk, checking something on her screen, said the unit had a tenant on a signed lease, had been occupied for over 2 years actually, longer than I'd lived there, but she couldn't share any details about who for privacy reasons, which I understood, and which didn't help me at all. The last thing that happened made me actually move out 4 months before my lease was up. Eating the fee happened on a night in late November. I'd gotten home around 12:30 a.m. after an exceptionally slow, uneventful shift, the kind where nothing happens and you're grateful for it. I was standing at my kitchen counter eating cereal over the sink, not really thinking about anything, half watching something on my phone propped against the toaster, when I heard, from the shared wall, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not the rhythmic thumping I'd gotten used to. Knocks. Evenly spaced, unmistakably intentional, coming from the wall between our units, at almost exactly the height of my head as I stood at the counter. I froze completely. The wall between our units wasn't a door, wasn't an adjoining space of any kind that I was aware of. It was a standard interior apartment wall, drywall over studs, nothing on the other side but 2C's own interior wall. There was no reason for anyone to knock on it, no reason it would even occur to someone to knock on a shared wall the way you'd knock on a door, unless they knew somehow exactly where I was standing on my side of it. I didn't knock back, I didn't make a sound. I stood at that counter for probably 5 full minutes without moving, cereal going soft in the bowl, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. Not that night. But I didn't sleep at all, and the next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, I called the leasing office the moment they opened and asked about breaking my lease early, citing a family emergency I didn't actually have, because I couldn't bring myself to explain the real reason in a way that wouldn't have made me sound unwell. I moved out in early December, into a different complex entirely, across the river, and I've never gone back to Fenwick Court, not even to drive past it. I don't know who or what was in 2C. I don't know if it was a person going through something I have no right to judge from outside a shared wall. Grief, isolation, mental illness, any number of ordinary human struggles that might explain an empty-looking apartment and a repetitive nighttime routine and a knock on a wall that could, in the most generous reading, have been coincidental timing and nothing more. I don't fully believe the generous reading. I've never been able to. There was something about the specificity of those 3 knocks, the height, the timing, right as I stood exactly there, that felt less like coincidence and more like being told clearly and calmly that I was being listened to, tracked through the wall in a way I still don't have a mechanism for. I looked up the complex's old tenant listings once, months later, out of the same compulsive curiosity that got me into this in the first place, using a records request tool a friend showed me for property tax purposes. Unit 2C, Fenwick Court, showed no registered leaseholder name in any public record I could access, despite what the leasing office had told me. I don't know if that means anything. Public records miss things all the time, I told myself. I still tell myself that. I never heard the thumping or the voice or anything like those 3 knocks again after I moved. My new place is quiet. I sleep fine, most nights. But every so often, usually after a hard shift, I'll be standing at my kitchen counter and I'll catch myself glancing at the wall, waiting. And I hate that some small part of me still expects it to happen again, in a completely different building, on a completely different side of the city, for no reason I could ever explain to anyone who asks me why. That's all 3 stories for tonight. If there's one thing that ties these together, it's that none of them end the way you want them to. No arrest, no confession, no tidy explanation that lets you close the door on it and sleep easy. Erin never found out who left that coffee cup, or who turned her thermostat up while she was sleeping 12 hours away at work. Josh never found out how a stranger knew his name before he'd ever said it out loud, and Priya still doesn't know what, or who, was on the other side of that wall, knocking at exactly the right height, at exactly the right moment. That's usually how it goes with the real ones. The scary stories that actually happen to someone rarely wrap up clean. The person just moves, changes their number, stops parking on that street, learns to live a little more carefully, and never quite says out loud why. If you've had something like this happen to you, something you still think about, something you never told anyone because it sounds crazy the second it leaves your mouth, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments or send it in through the link in the description. Some of the best stories on this channel started exactly that way. If tonight kept you company, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if you're watching this alone, late, with the lights off, thank you for staying with me. I'll see you in